Hello everyone, once again I am back with a new project related image transition animation using hover effect. And in this lesson we are going to learn this interesting image hover effect. So when I hover on this image, as you can see, a semi-transparent background appears from the bottom and it covered the whole image. Then after that a caption appears from the top, and if I move out my cursor from this image area, again it disappears the background image and the caption area. Now if you look at closely, if I hover my cursor on this image, the caption appear after the background appear. It take little time to appear it. So here I use little delay between them. And the same way, if I hover out my cursor, you can notice the caption disappear first, then it going to disappear the background. So this is what we are going to create today. So let's start the practical. Hey, before we start our practical, I would like to introduce a course on Udemy. It is the most complete and organized course about CSS on Udemy. It's come with 31 plus hour on-demand videos, 201 downloadable resources. Also, you can get full lifetime access and certificate of completion. As I told you, it is the most complete course about CSS and it covers all the topics. This course is divided into 16 sections. Our first section is for introduction. Then we cover the CSS fundamentals. Next we cover font related properties, background related properties, CSS layout, and advanced CSS such as unit, CSS variable, CSS function, etc. Then we cover the advanced CSS selectors such as combinator selectors, pseudo class selector, pseudo element selector, and many. After that we cover advanced fundamentals, animation, CSS grid, Flexbox. Also with that we cover SVG graphics, SVG animation, and at last we cover Sass, a CSS preprocessor as bonus. So it is the most organized course on Udemy, and you don't need to pay this amount of price for that. Just use my link which I provide in my description and you can get nearly 60% of discount instantly. So let's back to the Visual Studio Code editor and start our project. So as you can see, side by side I open my Visual Studio Code editor and my browser using Lifesaver extension, and I already created an HTML document named index.html. With that I create style.css file and I link this file with this document. So let's start with HTML. So inside the body tag, here I'm going to take a div tag, div, and here I'm going to set a class to this div element which is figure, F-I-G, fig. After that, inside this div element, I'm going to take a image tag, img, image, and as a source I'm going to use this image, ocean.jpg. So type ocean.jpg. After that, I'm going to take another div element. So I'm going to type div dot, and I'm going to set a class to this div element. So I'm going to type caption, div dot caption, and inside this div element, here I'm going to take a h3 tag, h3 heading 3, and I'm going to type hello world. Here you can type anything, it's up to you. And then I'm going to take another heading tag which is h5, and here I'm going to type, you can type anything here, so I'm going to type lorem, and I'm going to use total 5 word, and then I'm going to save this file. After save this file, as you can see, this image covered the whole page, and definitely it's looking very ugly. Now let's jump into the CSS file and make it look little nicer. So here, first I'm going to target the body tag, body, body. Inside the curly braces, the first property I'm going to use margin, the first property I'm going to use margin, and here I'm going to use set margin 0 from all of the direction, and display I'm going to make it flex, align item center, and justify content also center. After that I'm going to define height. Here I'm going to define height 100 viewport height VH. And at last I'm going to define background color. Background color. For background color you can use any color, and I'm going to use dark gray color. So I'm going to pass 222 and I'm going to save this file. And next I'm going to style this fig div element fig. So I copy its class name and back to style.css file, and I'm going to target it using dot free. Inside the curly braces, the first property I'm going to use width, and I'm going to make it, I'm going to assign width 500 pixel. After that I'm going to define color, and I'm going to make the color white. Also I'm going to define font family, and here I'm going to use Arial font. Next I'm going to define border radius. Here I'm going to use border radius 10 pixel. And at last I'm going to define position, and I want to make it relative. And I'm going to set this file. After set this file, this is how now it's look like. And now we need to style the image which is inside this fig div element. So here I'm going to type dot fig space image, image tag. Then inside the curly braces, here I'm going to define width, and I'm going to make it 100%, and I'm going to save this file. After save this file, this is how our image look like. And if you want to reduce it, you can use 400 also. I think 400 is good for it. Yes. And now it's looking much better. We have the image and the caption is below it. Now let's work on the semi-transparent background, which slides in from the bottom and cover the whole image. For that, we are going to use before pseudo element. Here I'm going to use before pseudo elements of type dot fig and colon before. Then inside the curly braces, first I'm going to create a blank content, and here I'm going to create a blank content. After that, I'm going to define position of this content, and I'm going to make it absolute. Then we need to define from where we are going to start the content. So from the top, I'm going to pass 0, and from the left, I'm going to pass 0. So we're going to start the element from the top left corner. After that, I'm going to define width and height. And I'm going to define width same as this container, the fig container. So I'm going to use 100%. Also height 100%, same as the fig container area. After that, I'm going to define background color. Here I'm going to use kind of greenish color. So here I'm going to type hashtag 006266, this color code. And also I'm going to set opacity because our background is transparent, semi-transparent. So I'm going to type opacity, and I'm going to set it 0.5. And I'm going to set this file. After set this file, this is how it's look like. Next, we need to work on the caption. We need to center horizontally and vertically inside this fig element. So let's target the element. So I'm going to type dot fig space dot. I want to target the caption element. So I'm going to type caption. Then inside the curly braces, first property I'm going to use position. I'm going to make it absolute. Then I want to start from the top. I'm going to pass 0, and also I'm going to assign width, and I want to assign width 100%. Then I'm going to assign height. I want to assign height 100%. After that, I want to assign display property, and I want to make it flex, and flex direction, I want to make it column, because here I want to put the H3 element below the H5 element. That's why I use column here. If we do not use column, then it's going to put both the element side by side in a single row. That's why we use column here. And in order to center them, I'm going to type align items center. Also justify content center. And I'm going to set this file. After set this file, this is where we put both the element. Now the caption section is centered horizontally and vertically. But the problem is H5 and H3 element not looking so good. So we need to style these elements. First I'm going to target H3 element. So I'm going to type dot fig fig, and inside this fig div I want to target H3, and inside the curly braces the first property I'm going to use margin. I'm going to set margin 0. Then basically here I'm going to remove the default margin, and then I'm going to set letter spacing. And I'm going to set it 1 pixel px. After that I'm going to define text transform property. Text transform I'm going to make it uppercase. Also I'm going to define font weight. I think I don't need to define font weight for that. And also I'm going to use margin bottom property. Margin bottom I'm going to use 5 pixel, and I'm going to save this file. After save this file, now H3 element look like that. Now we need to work on H5 element. For that, I'm going to duplicate this section and I'm going to replace H3 with H5. Then nearly I'm going to use the same properties, but for the H5 element, here I'm going to use background color, and I want to use this color code hashtag AE895D, this color code. Also I'm going to define padding to this element. So I'm going to type padding. From top and bottom I'm going to use 3 pixel, and from left and right I'm going to use 10 pixel, and I'm going to set this file. After set this file, this is how our element look like. Next we need to work on the hover effect. We need to move this background from the bottom. For that we need to jump into the before pseudo element at that element, and from here we need to move this element, this before pseudo element, below this container. So whenever I move my cursor on it, then it's going to rise up from the bottom. So I'm going to use transform property for that, transform, and I'm going to use translate y value, translate y, and here I'm going to use 100%, and I'm going to set this file. After set this file, as you can see, it moved the element. It moved downward by 100%. Now it's right below the fig element, and we need to make it invisible outside the fig element. For that, inside this fig element, I'm going to use another property, which is overflow hidden, and I'm going to set this file. After set this file, now you can see it hide the element. Now this element is not visible anymore. Now on hovering over the fig, I want to background element slide up again, and I want it back its original position. For that we need to set the hover selector. So after the before pseudo element, I'm going to type dot fig fig colon hover colon, I want to target the before element, before. Then inside the curly braces, I want to transform the element. So type transform translate x, and I'm going to pass 0 value. So after save this file, if I hover my cursor on this element, you can see the background element when I hover my cursor on it, but you cannot experience the transformation because here we need to use the property. We need to use transition property here. So in this before element, I'm going to type transition all, and our transition duration is 0.001 0.25 second. 25. And I'm going to save this file. After save this file, if I hover my cursor on this element, now you can notice the transformation. As you can see, when I hover my cursor on this element, from the bottom it appeared the background and covered the area. And now we need to work on the caption. But before, I'm going to add transition delay to this pseudo element. So I'm going to type transition delay, and I'm going to pass 0.25 second, and I'm going to save it. So whenever I hover my cursor on this element, after 0.25 second, it appeared the background. Also, if I move out my cursor from this area, it's going to wait for 0.25 seconds. After 0.25 seconds, it's going to move down this element. But I don't want it. I don't want 0.25 seconds delay when I hover my cursor on this element. I want to rise up this element instantly when I hover on it. But when I hover out my cursor, I want this delay, 0.25 second delay. For that, I'm going to type transition delay. I'm going to make it 0 second. So if I set this file and hover my cursor on this element, as you can see, it's not going to wait for 0.25 seconds. Instantly, it move up the element. But if I remove my cursor from this area, it's going to wait for 0.25 seconds. Background is moving immediately when I hover on it. But if I hover out my cursor, it's going to wait for 0.25 seconds. Also, we need to remove the caption from this image. When I hover my cursor, after the background, we need to appear the caption again. For that, we need to jump into the caption selector, and the property I'm going to use transform, and here I'm going to use translate y value, translate y, and here I'm going to move this element from -20 pixel, and I'm going to set this file. After set this file, as you can see, we move up this element little bit. Then I'm going to set opacity, and I'm going to make it 0. Now it is not visible anymore. Also, I'm going to set transition on it, transition all, and our transition time is 0.25 second. And I'm going to set this file. Now let's create the hover selector of this caption button. So I'm going to type .fig :hover, and I want to target the caption element, then inside the curly braces, if I hover my cursor on this fig element, then I want to move this caption element. First, I'm going to make the opacity visible again. Opacity, I'm going to make it 1. Then I'm going to use transform property, transform, and here I'm going to use translate y value, translate y, and I'm going to pass 0 here. So it's going to back to its original place again. After set this file, if I hover my cursor on this image, as you can see, instantly it appeared the element, the caption element, but I want little delay. So here I'm going to type transition delay. I'm going to use 0.3 second, and I'm going to save this file. After save this file, if I hover my cursor on it, now you can see after the background element, it's going to wait for 0.3 second. Then it appeared the caption div element. So finally, we achieve our desired result. So this is how we create this beautiful hovering effect on image. So thanks for watching this video. Stay tuned for our next project.